Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I am Kathy Groover, and we are going to be talking today about ego states. And this is something I'm really excited about. If you watched Mike Mandel's episode, he actually started to introduce this concept of ego states and was talking about these cards and how you bring states to the executive. Well, we're going to do a little deeper dive into that because I got the cards, I got the books, and I'm actually, in my Capricorn way, actually enrolled in the course to become a resource therapist because it resonated so well with me. So I've worked with this with a couple clients. I've worked with some stuff on myself with all of this. So we're going to talk today about how you can use these cards and this whole concept of ego states to improve your life and make yourself more
Well, I think it's good because, when Mike was talking, he referred to these interactive cards. So we both ended up going out and getting them. And, beautiful pictures, first off, right? But this whole idea of ego states, and hopefully, again, if you didn't listen to Mike's podcast episode, go back and listen to that. Yeah, because the man is just freaking amazing. Okay, but there's a lot of these times where we'll react, or a certain ego state will show up that's not really appropriate. Like the little kid shows up, and it's like, damn it, I got to be an adult right now.
Right.
So talking a little bit more, how to actually use this kind of technique or think about it so that we can have more of the right or apropos, ego states showing up at the right time so that we're not having these issues in our relationships and in our performance in general. Right.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating because I went through these cards and what they recommend, and there's, any number of, just the pictures are great. And what's fabulous about them is there's no words on it. It doesn't say like enforcer. It doesn't say, I don't know what you call that, but there's
goddess.
Right. It doesn't say athlete, but it also doesn't say obsessed with exercise to escape. But this could mean anything to anybody. I know you were running, you were talking about doing a marathon. This could just be you in your healthy state of running. Or I have a client who is doing like 100-mile races, and I have to question, what are you running from? Or what are you running towards? So all of these cards in some way can have a positive or negative aspect to them. It's however you interpret it in that time. And I had pulled cards for myself, and then a friend of mine did it, and cards that I deemed slightly negative or not serving me, she felt were positive in her life. So this is a very customizable thing. So what I recommend getting these cards. I got mine off Amazon. Did you get yours direct from the company that Mike recommended, or do you know where you got
I did,
yours?
but actually it's a Canadian company, and I guess actually the cards are manufactured here in the US. So I paid a little bit more for them, and they still shipped them anyway, but you can buy them. We'll try to put a link in the show notes for it if you're interested.
Yeah.
I think they were, I don't know, 20 or 25 bucks. They're beautiful art pieces, if nothing else, too.
Yeah, they really
are.
are.
Like you said, because they're just a picture, it can mean different things to each person. In fact, it'll probably mean different things to you at different times, because these cards are just used as a way to kind of trigger or bring up kind of some of the stuff that you need to be thinking about and kind of deal with at that particular point in time, right? So there's no it's not like they're magic cards, if you will. They're kind of magical in what they do, but it's more about, again, what we need to hear at that time and what we need to work through. It's a tool to help you do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I seriously do recommend getting a deck of these cards. It's a $20 investment, and it's really just such an insightful thing. And since here on the Fire and Earth podcast, we are trying to, unlock your potential, this is one of the ways to do that. $20? Really? Come on, we can do that. It's like, 2 days of coffee from Starbucks. So what I did, and what was recommended through the course that I'm in, and the website that goes along with the cards, is just flip through the cards and just pick what resonates with you. That was the first thing it recommended it do. So if it doesn't jazz you in some way, and you don't even have to know why, because when I did this with a friend, she pulled one of the cards and she goes, I don't know what this card means. I don't have any idea what it is to me, but it appeals to me. I'm like, great. And then I kind of set them out of what are the positive cards and what are the negative cards? And a couple of the negative cards, you know, things like that, you know, I was horribly bullied as a child, and we were talking about this online. So there are still times that this little humiliated kid comes out in me. And then the scared kid of am I going to get yelled at? Did I do something wrong? As a kid, I was always afraid of doing something wrong. Even if I hadn't done anything wrong before, like if the principal would walk into the room, my first thought was, did I do something wrong? Still to this day, how many of you, if there's a cop following you,
oh yeah,
you could be doing the speed limit. You wonder if you did something wrong. Okay, so that's one of my little hurt kids. And then there's the little abandoned kid because I lost a parent young. So, you know, these are some of the negative or the hurt personality types in me. Now, then we get something like that's my inner superhero, that if that little kid comes up, I can call on my inner superhero to help. Or the nurturing mother, you know, I'm not a mother, but I certainly have the ability to nurture myself and nurture those people around me. So once you pick those cards that resonate with you, what I did is I picked ones that I deemed positive and negative. And then I went through and figured out if there are any in conflict. And this is a huge thing, especially in productivity, because Jason, I know we've always had that night where you're like, I really just want to sit down and watch a movie. And there's another part of you that's like, dude, you didn't do any work today. You've got to do that email and you've got to get that speaking thing updated. You know, there's two healthy states, work and play, but they're in conflict with each other. So what do we do about that? You know, at this point, that's when you have to kind of negotiate between those two states and realize they both have purpose, they both have value. And one of the things when we're actually doing therapy with this is we name the states.
Well, so let's kind of take that a little bit deeper, because again, I mean, that's something you felt, I felt, I'm sure pretty much everybody listening at some point in our life, we felt that way.
Yep.
Right? Where it's like, I'm just done. I'm so tired. You know, I don't feel like doing that, but maybe you've made a commitment to yourself, right? Or to somebody else that you're going to have something done by a certain time. Now, sometimes those are kind of false deadlines or self-imposed deadlines that are not really that important, because I know I find myself expecting that I can get way more done any given day or any given week than I actually get done. So part of it's I need to have a little bit more grace with myself and realize that, you know, like you said, hey, if that website doesn't go up for another month, it's not that big a deal. Right. It'll be okay. Right. So, you know, so I was going to say, so when we get in this kind of situation, how do we then start looking at or kind of thinking about these two states that are kind of in conflict and start kind of, you know, consciously working our way through this to try to figure out why are we reacting this way and what should we do about it?
Yeah. So if you have two healthy states in conflict, so if you've got the work state that is like, come on, you have to get this stuff done, my inner Capricorn, which I'm glad she's there. She keeps me on task. Inner Capricorn is fabulous. However, I also have these states that want to play, that want to go to dance class, that want to go do trapeze, that want to sit down and just read, or want to veg out with a glass of wine on the TV. You have to recognize that both those states have value. Those are two healthy states. We have to work, we have to rest. And as you and I have talked about, you know, it's just as important to decentrate as it is to concentrate. So which, you know, can you negotiate that? Now, if someone came to my office, because I actually did this yesterday with a woman, we sat the two states down. I addressed the states by name. Work, do you understand? You know, what do you need? Well, we have to get stuff done because we have to keep our clients, because we have to make money. Great, that's a value. What do you think about play? Oh, well, play is lazy and play doesn't want to have anything. You know, play keeps me from doing my work. Okay. Play, did you hear what work just said? Yeah, what work doesn't understand is if we don't have time to play, I'm not going to be as productive. So if we can work out that maybe for an hour a day, I get to play and rest, then work is going to be more productive. Then you go back, work, how do you feel about that? Yeah, I understand what she's saying, and I think that's something we could work out. You give them a name and you negotiate that. Now, you kind of need another person to do that because I have actually.
Well, or you end up talking to yourself, right? I mean, I've heard that like with self-coaching, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is you know, it's like playing chess by yourself, right? You move chairs or do whatever
you actually move chairs.
But you actually move, you know, put two chairs down and you talk from the one person, then you move over to the other chair, you talk from the other person. So as you were doing that with this client, were you kind of leaning that direction as far as saying what they were saying, or she was actually then saying,
Oh no,
okay,
she
now
was.
talk from work. Work, you just heard what Play said.
Yep.
Work, how would you respond to what Play said? So you're just kind of facilitating
Exactly.
that discussion between the two ego states.
Yep, exactly. And that's what a resource therapist does, is they will facilitate that conversation. And also though, when you recognize that you have these states, so, finding those two states in conflict and finding a resolution for that, that's probably one of the easier things to do, because those are healthy states. You have to have work, you have to have play. However, one of the things I realized is when I get too inner Capricorn, when my very working, teaching, when that state gets out of hand, it leads to, oh, now we're getting a little more strict. Uh-oh, now we're forgetting people have emotions and we're so locked in work. Uh-oh, now we're ignoring everything around us and we've gotten into a work state where I'm just lost in that hamster wheel, and there's actually a hamster wheel card too, work state. And I can see the cards progress from this positive thing to this negative thing. And we talked about that too, where it's like, this girl handles everything. I get everything done. My to-do list is fixed until one thing goes awry, and then this happens. And I go crazy for a second. And that anxiety comes over. So how do you stop that? And I think that's, the negotiating between two states, I think we probably can do a little easier. It's that what happens when a state goes so off the rails, it becomes so negative. And that's sometimes a little harder to rein in, and you might need help with that one. Either a friend or a colleague or somebody that can be like, dude, you're crazy Capricorn's out,
Well, because we've already kind of progressed through those different states, right? As far as feeling to where we are. And if we can catch ourselves maybe sooner. I mean, I love that example of where you're saying, okay, here's the serious work person, but if I focus too much on that, then I become this person and this person and this person and this person, until all of a sudden, like you said, I'm ignoring everybody.
Yep.
Work is the only thing that's important. I'm steamrolling over anybody who gets in my way because I'm so focused on what I'm going to do that come hell or high water, right? Yep. I'm getting her done, right?
Yep. And then what it leads to is this. This is my inner hedonist.
Yeah.
Who will then go, fuck it all, and I'll sit on the couch and I will justify an entire night of wine because I deserve it, because I worked so hard. So this can be fun. This is the let's go party and let's have a beach party and let's have a house party. But this can also be the wake up the next morning completely hungover with drug paraphernalia all around you. Not me. But people do that. They take themselves to an extreme and then they have to respond in that extreme rather than taking that, let me just read for 15 minutes. So it is, you're right. It's about an awareness of, because cards falling all over the place. It's about an awareness of knowing which state is executive and bringing the right state forward at the right time.
Yeah. So maybe let's just touch on that again, because Mike did talk about that. But for those maybe that haven't heard it already, because effectively in this, resource therapy kind of idea is that there, and this goes back to a lot of other things as well, right? That we are an age that we are, but we are a makeup of all of the ages and experiences that we have been before. So we carry all of that stuff with us. That's why sometimes things trigger us. We go back to being that 8-year-old, left alone or picked on, bullied kid, right? We go back to that sad kid. And what happens is that sad kid becomes executive. Or what it means is that they've kind of moved from the background to being what we are primarily doing and who we are primarily being, right? There's that being that we were talking about before, right?
Yep.
And sometimes that's okay, depending on the ego state. But when the hurt and kind of neglected kid shows up, we're probably going to make some decisions and do things because we're being that little kid again, right? And sometimes that's okay, but most of the time we're adults, so we have to be in that adult state or find one of those ego states as an adult that we're going to make executive. So that's what it means when we're saying that, make that executive is, that's the ego state that you're going from currently. That's the one you're stepping into, that you're actually making the decisions from, right? And it even goes back. I mean, I heard one of the other things I heard is, if think about how the person you want to be would do what you're about to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's that same idea, right? Is if we're about to do something, which ego state do we need to have executive to be that person?
Yep, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting because having a state that's vated, which is this hurt state, you can be vated in fear, vated in rejection, vated in confusion. So that this little kid is vated in rejection. So, and this is one of my cards. So if I'm feeling rejected, like I said, I had a conversation with the guy I'm dating last night that he wants less time than I want, which is a valid thing. We're both adults. We have things to do. We have lives to handle. But even though that's a completely rational thing, and my very rational, this is the healthy side of my Capricorn, goes, well, of course, we're not going to spend every waking moment with each other. But this went, why don't you want to spend every waking moment with me? If you're rejecting me, you don't love me, you're going to leave. And I had to go, dude, bring in your inner adult. Mm-hmm. You're okay. So, but it's like, I have awareness of these states and I can feel them shifting. And you see this so often when you go home for the holidays.
Yes.
Don't you revert back to a 13-year-old, or don't your siblings treat you like you're still 10? It brings up that ego state. And there's a whole play. I used to love this play. I don't remember what it's called, but I was thinking about it when I started working with this. This couple's dating. They've been together for a while. And she finally says, do you want to come home to meet my parents for Christmas? And the guy's like, absolutely. And the curtain closes, the curtain opens. It's now the living room with the parents, and the parents are sitting there having dinner, or they're decorating the tree or something, and the couple walks in, and it's the same guy, but it's a little girl. And every time the scene is with the parents, it's a little girl, and the grown man is like, what just happened? And it was so cool because it was this very physical illustration of she reverted back to being this little kid. I've seen people do that. Like they talk like a perfect adult, and then they get around their parents and like, Daddy! It's like, whoa, what age did you just become? You are no longer 40. You're a 13-year-old now. So they became executive.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we either kind of choose to do that, right,
Yeah.
by going, oh, Daddy, and acting like the little 8-year-old girl again, or sometimes the other person makes us feel that way.
Yep.
It's like my older siblings. I mean, again, we're grown ass adults, right? And I mean, my oldest brother, geez, he's 60 something or other, right? Late 60s now. And he's an old man in comparison, right? Like when we were kids, we would have thought that this man that was in his late 60s is just like ancient, right? But again, when I get around him, he treats me like I'm that little 5-year-old kid again. Right. And a couple of my siblings do that. So, and it's not that I want to show up that way necessarily, but that's how I get treated. And obviously when I start to get treated that way, which ego state's going to jump in, that little 5-year-old kid is going to want to kind of jump in again because we're used to responding that way. Right.
Or Ice Queen comes in. Well, I mean, you probably don't have it, but you have some version of Ice Queen. So the protection mechanism is if I start to feel like this or start to feel rejected, I'm like, okay, great. And I completely shut down, no emotion at all, because that emotion hurts. So rather than letting hurt little kid be out and have a conversation around that, it's covered up with Ice Queen. Or it's covered up with hedonist, so this is the other way these ego states work is there's a state that comes forward to protect that 5-year-old kid. So if your brother always bullied you and you don't want that anymore, it might come up with some other state that encompasses that in a healthy or unhealthy way. So that was one of my problems, in a couple relationships, is if I started to feel hurt or threatened, I would, okay, shut down. I'm going to work. I'm going to ignore you. Everything. I'm going to leave the house because I want to get away, and I would be distracted with work. And, that way you didn't have to focus on that thing. So that's one of the ways to cover up that hurt, to cover up that vated state. So that's another option too, is covering it up with another unhealthy state. This is why people have addiction.
Well, it is. I mean, because that's again, that's how they're choosing to cope with it. They're using that
Mm-hmm.
hedonism, to kind of cope with or get away from those feelings, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
actually feeling it
Yep.
and just and pushing through that feeling, right? And again, this is
Yep.
why, from a therapy perspective, whether it's hypnotherapy, NLP,
Mm-hmm.
resource therapy, whatever you happen to use, it's helping us to try to unblock those
Yep.
traumas that we have, so that instead of switching to hedonism and sticking a needle in your arm or
Mm-hmm.
doing whatever, that we're actually dealing with that pain or trauma, we're
Yep.
working through it, we're
Mm-hmm.
having those discussions, right? Of, well, why do you feel this way? Well, I feel this way because of this. Oh, well, can you
Mm-hmm.
understand? Da, 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 right? And going back and forth, and actually push through, feel those emotions, but
Yep.
push through them, so that neglected, left, dejected little kid, whatever it happens to be, doesn't need to keep showing up because you've
Yep.
already worked through that.
And
Now,
here's, well, I was just saying, here's one of the interesting things about that is in talk therapy, when I show up to talk therapy, you get my normal intellectually talking about everything else state. I can tell you all about my hurt little kid. If that state is not executive, if that little kid isn't the one talking, it's not going to get fixed.
yeah,
This is what's cool about resource therapy. So, and of course, this is like, I'm doing it right now. So I'm like, everybody should be doing this. You have to bring that state to the executive. So I would have to bring up my hurt little rejected kid, and the resource therapist would work with that state. Because if another state is talking about, that's like me talking about your need for therapy. Unless we actually get you in the room, nothing's going to change. So one of the things we do in resource therapy is we get to that, we bring that state to the executive. So I would feel those feelings from last night of feeling that rejection. Oh God, I do. I could actually bring it up. I can feel it right here. And then you radiate that, radiate that, radiate that until you're in it. And then you look back and go, okay, so dip your feet in that feeling. How old were those feet? And it typically takes you back to childhood. And you're like, oh, they're kind of 8 years old. Or are you inside or outside? Oh, I'm inside. Well, are you by yourself or with other people? Well, my mom is there and she said she doesn't have time to play with me, or whatever it is. And then you can heal that from back there, and then you don't need to cover it up. And then you also want to bring the state forward that's been protecting them. Hey, Jester, I know you've been protecting that little kid with humor, and you were the class clown, and you're now you get very Chandler from Friends, covering up emotions with humor, or you can cover up emotions with food. Where is Mike's happy pig? I love that card.
yeah.
But then you want to, there it is, happy pig.
Mm-hmm.
Let's eat our emotions, feed our feelings, that kind of thing. But you do want to thank that state for helping. And then you give them a new job
Yeah.
because they serve a purpose. So, I mean, this is why I love this, because it actually gets to the root of the problem and solves these issues.
Well, and that's why, because some of the things that I've gone through, personally with that, like that, where you get that ego state to kind of show back up,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's hypno, NLP, whatever it
Yep.
happens to be, right? And that feeling, or that release that kind of happens, right? I mean, I remember one of the sessions that I was going through, and it was about, I was probably, I must have been 8, maybe
Mm-hmm.
9 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, kind of talking to that little kid, and that whole idea of, 9-year-old Jason, you know is that really what it means? No. Do you have to keep feeling that way?
Mm-hmm.
No. Right. And just this kind of release that ends up happening, that it's kind of weird, but
Mm-hmm.
it actually happens,
Yep.
right? Like that, where, and maybe it takes more than one time. Sometimes, boom, first time you're done.
Yeah,
It depends on kind of how deep seated or weighted some of these traumas actually are,
absolutely.
right? But one of the things that you brought up, and even in your example right there, when you were thinking back to your discussion last night,
Mm-hmm.
you started to feel it, right?
Yeah.
So maybe let's talk just a little bit for people too of, how to start feeling or being emotionally intelligent to the
Mm-hmm.
feelings that we're having, and how that might relate back to some of these ego states, so that we know, oh, hold it just a minute. 9-year-old Jason's trying to come back out. Why is he trying to do that?
Yeah.
And how we kind of work through that in the moment. Okay. Because again, a lot of times we don't have the ability to sit down and do some of that self-coaching or other stuff. It's like, hey, Kathy, time out. I need to go take, 20 minutes and talk to myself, and then we'll come back and finish the discussion. Sometimes you can. It depends on the other person and how understanding they are.
Yeah.
But how do we kind of, band-aid it in the situation so we don't make things worse?
Yep.
But then again, realize and consciously know, I got to go back and take care of this shit.
Yep.
Right?
I'll give you the perfect example. So, and we talked about this before. So my dad died as I was driving to do a TED Talk. So what ego state wanted to be forward for me? I wanted to sob like a little kid. I just lost my daddy. Oh my God, my best friend is dead. Holy shit. Nope.
Yep. Ice Queen had to show up.
She had to. There was no way I was going to be able to do that talk if she didn't show up. The second I got off stage, I lost my shit backstage. I mean, thank you, hand the mic. I was gone on the floor. She was like, Kathy needs help. I didn't call her I kind of did call her consciously, because as I was talking to people about it on the phone, I talked to my ex-husband and the guy I was dating, blah, 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 blah. I was very specific of, okay, I just need to power through this, and I can't think about that. I was very unconsciously, but consciously calling forward Capricorn Ice Queen to handle this situation for me. Now that I have knowledge of these ego states, like last night as I was starting to feel that little scared kid and I wanted to get clingy to him, which would have completely backfired, because when someone says, let's have some more space, the last thing you want to do is cling, 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 cling. It's what we tend to do. So I specifically, in that moment, said, where is my inner nurturing adult? I don't need him to comfort me. I have to be able to self-soothe and comfort myself. And if I didn't have knowledge of these states ahead of time, and this is why I think it's so fun to lay out these cards and know what your states, get to know your states, name them. I have an entire chart of my states and what they do and how to call them up. Sometimes you can call them up with an anchor. Sometimes you can call them up with music. Music totally gets me to shift state. Certain movies, don't you feel empowered like after watching certain movies or listening to certain music? And when I was heading for my tax audit, on the way to the tax audit, I blared 9 Inch Nails the entire way, because that gets me into this tough girl, very straightforward, no nonsense. Fuck you, we're doing this kind of thing. You could just as opposed to
IRS agent, you don't know who you're getting.
Because I don't want this to show up to my tax audit. Oh my God, okay, well, I don't know how much money I made last year. And, it's like, we don't want that coming forward. I don't want that on stage. I play on stage, but I don't want it to be the frivolous little kid. So, it's like we do have a choice, and we can, once we know those states, we can call them up, bring them executive, and there are ways to do that. There's ways to trigger that into action. Yeah. That was a long explanation. Sorry.
Well, so no. It's great, because actually you brought up a couple of points too that I just wanted to explain a little bit, because I'm not sure if everybody understands what these mean, but these are some practical tips that you can actually do. So effectively, what you're saying again is you start to realize some of the different ego states that you have. And when something pops up, it's almost like, all right, hey, Ice Queen Kathy, you're needed on stage right now. Where's my Ice Queen? And you can do things to try to help that ego state come forward. You talked about anchoring. Anchoring, again, it's doing certain things that anchor you in a feeling. It can be, holding, 2 fingers together. It can be closing your eyes and saying a word. It can be doing a motion like, yes, it can be putting on a hat, or, doing something that reminds you of, hey, this is what Ice Queen Kathy does, right? And it helps call her out at the time that she's needed. And then again, as we do that, it's like, it's almost like we're the director of our life, if you want to think about this, right? And you've got all of these different actors that can come out on the stage, and you need to help decide which one needs to show up at which point. But then make a note to yourself, right? Again, like you did, Kathy, it was, my dad just died. Holy shit. I've got this, I'm on my way to the speech. Ice Queen, you got to show up, but note to self, as soon as I no longer need Ice Queen, I got to go back and actually deal with and have the ego show up that I need to deal with this issue in my life right now.
Yep, to have those emotions. And that is, something we do. We stuff emotions with food, with drugs, with work, with, we do at some point have to process those emotions. And yeah, it's fascinating. So I had a point. I don't know. It's gone. That ego state left.
The ego state left. Come back.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, and I think what's interesting too, I've actually noticed one of the guys that I listen to a lot of his podcasts and stuff, he will, just like that, when here's kind of another way of anchor or help to tap your subconscious a little bit, is when he's trying to explain something and he can't remember, he'll actually ask himself a question. And one of it's interesting because I've watched this kind of from the sidelines, and I don't know if he's consciously doing it or not, but I'm seeing where, like that, it's like, oh, I had a point. And then he'd say, what was that point that I had? Or, some kind of a thing like that. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom, the answer comes in. That asking ourselves questions, and this goes back to, I can't remember the guy that wrote the book on affirmations, where instead of, I don't know if you heard that, but instead of having affirmations as a statement, he sets them as a question.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So that you're asking yourself questions, because when you ask yourself a question, your subconscious wants to give you an answer.
Yes.
And so, again, it's like, saying, where is my Ice Queen? Where is my, fun-loving jester? Kind of a thing can even help them kind of come back out. So anyway, that was a little side thing just because of that.
Well, and I think we've also had the experience where we're like, yes, I totally want to go to this event and I will totally do that thing for you. And then we get home and we're like, why the fuck did I agree to do that? Oh my God, I totally don't want to do that thing. I mean, or it's like, yeah, let's go out on that date. We're going to have fun. I think that's why we're going to go into weird waters here. I think that's why there's that bravado in the bar of you pick up that guy and you're like, I'm totally going to sleep with him. And then you actually get in the moment. You're like, I don't know that you switched ego states. You suddenly either a fearful one comes up or that bravado tough girl. Yeah, let's go do that thing. And then you go, oh shit, I didn't want to. I think that's one of the issues. So the ego state that said, yeah, let's totally go do that thing, isn't there anymore. It's been overtaken by the rational one or the sober one or the whatever. And I think that's, one of the problems. I think we also fall in love with certain ego states. I have a friend who's a magician and women love him until he's not on stage anymore. They fall in love with his performance ego state, this sort of arrogant, sort of like, kind of a dick on stage, but there's something sexy about that. And then they actually go to dinner with him, and he has had several people say to him, I kind of like your performer better than you. It's like, oh, ow, and then of course, little kid is like, but it's true. He's having so much trouble meeting women because they see him as this very cocky, very confident person, which isn't who he is. That's his ego state on stage.
Well, and that's why it's for performers in general. That's hard because the public sees you as the performer.
Yep.
So yeah, if he's just wanting to, continue that, have fun, stay in that ego state when he's out dating, he's going to have fun, right? But if he wants a longer term relationship, he needs to probably meet people when he's in his normal ego states instead of his performer state, so they can actually see him for who he is. Instead of falling in love with that one ego state that only shows up, once or twice a week whenever he happens to be performing, right?
Yep.
So interesting. It's interesting.
I know, and this explains everything. I mean, it's like I was so jazzed when I found this, and I have played with so many different modalities and so many different things, and I do hypnosis, and this actually, Gordon Emerson actually created this for hypnosis. When you work with the ego states in therapy, like I will have a person in hypnosis, unless we're switching chairs, unless I'm doing negotiation, which like I said, I did the other day. So yeah, but it's the last card. Where was the last card I wanted to show you? Because there is a state that's executive most times. And it's interesting because I've tried to find the card that's executive. Where'd it go? I lost my
The one
card.
that dropped on the floor?
Yeah, well, maybe. I'm covered in cards. All right. You say something and I'll find the card that's executive.
Oh, I'm saying something. Just being a smartass. Well, no, yeah, well, because you made reference to Erickson too, which is interesting. I think
Emerson.
Emerson.
Yeah.
Mike made reference to he's one of the pioneers of hypnosis in the modern age in America. So yeah, he was even using this stuff back there, but then it's kind of been lost a little bit.
So those are two different. So Milton Erickson is the hypnosis guy.
Yeah. Gordon
Emerson is the resource therapy guy. He's in Australia.
Cool. Okay, that's why two E's. I was like,
yeah,
no, that's why when you said it, I was like, I was reading something about Erickson this morning. What are you talking about, Kathy? Okay, Emerson. Emerson was doing the resource stuff in Australia.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I learned something today too.
Oh, good. I hope so.
I hope so. I learned lots of stuff today.
But see that's what I was gonna say is what's fun about you and I is we can do like this professional thing, but we can also let our little kids out and just like tease each other and play. And I think that's what was appealing to each other when we met at the NSA meeting is we could see that there was that we sparked our little kids in each other. And I love that. So we all have an ego state that's just sort of our default ego state that's around all the time. This is mine. I love this card. And as I was searching for like a human that represented who I was all the time, I realized there wasn't one. This is what it is. It's this balance. It's the balance of reaching for the sky and being grounded in the earth. And my normal waking state, this is just sort of who I am until one of the others comes forward. And they're not always, like I said, they're not always positive-ish. They all have a purpose though. All of our ego states serve a purpose. They all serve a purpose.
Yep.
Unless they're evaded and stuffed down and then there's a state protecting them that's serving a purpose. So it's such a cool thing, and I've been having so much fun with this, and I've already helped 3 or 4 people with it in just the short amount of time I've been playing with it. So yeah, and
well,
myself, I have such deeper insight into myself, and so I know what to call forward when, which is awesome.
Well, and my nerdy ego state is taking over, and I've been taking all kinds of notes too. So it's because I bought the deck of cards, but I haven't really used them per se. I've flipped through them a few times, but yeah, now I've got a lot better idea of how I can actually go back and try to start using it or thinking about it.
Yep.
Because again, for me, I'm trying to be and show up right as that future self or that person that I want to be, that I want to share with the world, that's going to make an impact and a difference in the world. And I need to have that ego state show up more and more. And so when, like you said, when we notice that these other ones are kind of creeping in, it's like, okay, sometimes that's okay, but that to still go with that, but we need to try to be that other person as much of the time as we can be. And so again, if there's conflict between some of the different states, let's talk it through and figure out what's going on.
Exactly.
Let the little kid realize, hey, you know what? You're not neglected, and it's not that you're not loved, right? It's because of this, right? Can you understand that? Oh yeah, now I totally see that, right? I kind of get it, and kind of go from there. Yeah.
So flip through the cards, see which ones resonate with you. You don't even need to know why it resonates with you, but pull those out. And then kind of start looking at, what are my positive ones? What are the ones that maybe need a little bit more work, maybe are hurt ones that I'm going to have to counsel a little bit, see which ones are in conflict. Again, it's typically that work play. And then see what leads to what. And like I said, I have a progression of very focused on work, and then, oh my God, I'm critic. And then, you can chart that progression, and it tends to get less healthy as it gets down the line. And then what balance you have to find in that. And it's just all about self-awareness. And then being able to call a certain ego state forward. And I'm the same as Mike. He talked about, he has his lecture self, he has the librarian, which feeds him facts, and he has the jester, which does his job. I have the exact same thing. I have my lecture Kathy, I have Capricorn that feeds me information, and I have the comedian next to me who notes funny things and throws out funny lines. And I have to make sure the right one's there all the time. Because sometimes the humor can, you walk off stage and you have that ego boost, and then the humor comes out and people are like, why is she saying that? Or whatever. Anyway, so, but yeah, there's so many great ways to use this stuff. So
So go out and get a pack of the cards and just start playing with it and see, like you said, I mean, we've seen some benefits from it. Kathy's already had some clients that have gotten a lot of benefit from it. And it's more just that awareness.
Mm-hmm.
The more aware we are about what we're feeling and why we're feeling that way, the easier we can actually work through this stuff and not have it, continue to hold us down. Because if you're going to unlock your potential, you got to work through some of the shit in your life. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
If not, you're going to stay stuck where you are. You just have to have the courage to actually do it, even if it's a little bit different, even if it feels a little uncomfortable, because you know what? If you want a better, different life, it's going to feel uncomfortable because it's not what you're used to.
Yeah.
And you just got to get used to that. So
absolutely. Yay. So go
Yay.
forth, figure out what ego state you have executive, what you want to be executive. And again, it comes down to knowing what you want, and then who you are can come forward and help you with that. So, this has been a fun show. Yay. All right. I got cards all over my desk now. Capricorn would like to clean that up. Okay.
All right. There we go.
Excellent. I'm Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. And we'll see you on a future episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. See ya.